Hey everyone, welcome back to Free Art Design. We are continuing on with our webinar series, but with a little tangent into me hosting, and instead I'll be interviewing with the founder, Katie Hughes. Katie,
Hi.
can you talk about yourself and a little bit of an intro since you've been introing so many people recently?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Katie Hughes. I am 26, about to be 27. I live in Los Angeles, born and raised. Um, I when I was I've had this very weird educational slash career journey, and I can talk a little bit more about that. But basically, I just graduated from CalArts, and while I was doing my MFA in graphic design, I realized that art school is incredibly expensive, as is a lot of grad school, unless you're doing a PhD. And it didn't have to be. And I thought I wanted to create a sort of online community, in-person community, etc., where there were more free and accessible resources for artists and designers to have. And so that's why I've created the Free Art and Design School.
Eee! So so with fads, right? We call it fads,
Call it
right?
fads.
We call it fads. What are like the available resources currently? Like I know there's a few things on the website, and what do you think is gonna, how do you foresee fads continuing on as a resource center?
Yeah. I think right now it's pretty much mostly YouTube interviews. So what
Mhm.
I'm sort of envisioning, because we just started, basically I had the idea originally a couple months ago during my thesis, which was like the worst time ever to start a project like this. So really we only have been ramping up to speed within the last week for the most part. Currently we have a website called freeartanddesignschool.com, and there's a few articles, and then there's like a page of free design resources that are all open source. So there's no copyright material. It's all stuff that I've put up that like you can do whatever you want with it, and you don't have to cite me, you don't have to pay, you can use it in commercial stuff, it doesn't matter. What I'm envisioning in the future, once I have a lot of time to like make more content for the site, is a lot of more free resources, free fonts, free shapes, free little zines that have tutorials of like how to make things. So free like design PDFs. And then also articles by people like you and other art friends that I have who can write in about um, sort of whatever's on their mind. I'll vet the topics, but sort of like design theory articles. I found there's like a ton of resources on YouTube already from other people on how to do Photoshop, tutorials or like, more technical skills, but there isn't as much of a place for sort of theoretical discussions that you get mostly in
Mm.
art school. Um, so the YouTube channel, which is also Free Art and Design School, where this video will be hosted, um, currently has mostly artist interviews and educator interviews, but in the future, it's also going to have lectures by different people, not just me, teaching you how to do things. So it'll actually be free classes online. And then hopefully further in the future, we'll have like actual in-person meetups. The long goal is like, in 20 years, I like to have like different communities in different cities where people could meet up and like have art parties, kind of like the ones that you hosted
Oh
online.
my gosh, that would be
Yeah,
so cool.
exactly. Exactly. Or like, American education has completely defunded the arts. So if there was a way for
Hmm.
me to make tutorials or like classes or something that like could supplement those students where they've been sort of denied access to the arts. There's only so much you can do online because you don't have, you're not helping someone like learn how to physically do something. But that's the general arc of it that I want to happen.
Awesome. I think, well, I have a question, and I think this might also like help in the creative process of other people, whether or not it's art or visual art or, design or film. From what I understand, because I was somewhat a part of it, the original brainchild, because you were doing multiple, like, I don't know how many you did, but it was like 6 minute interviews
Yeah.
or 15-minute interviews with lots of people.
Yeah.
And then you continued on with your MFA. at Cal Arts, and then this kind of like evolved into what I understand is fads now. What was your mindset going into like, oh, let me take this original concept and develop it and like put, it's kind of like open source, but it's also like your brainchild in a sense. So like
Right.
developing that your stamp on it. What was that process going on?
Yeah, those are two big questions that I'll answer. The first is like previous projects versus this, and second is like my personal attachment to it. So the first thing is I had two previous YouTube channels that I really didn't know what I was doing. It's sort of like you
Hmm.
when you were doing Twitch and you started out and you were like, I'm just gonna try this. That's sort of how I was. So pre-pandemic, I had a show called like anyone can make art or something, and it was horrendous. It was like me drawing shit and being like, anyone can draw an egg. This is how you draw a pumpkin. And it was like I just didn't know how to do social media, and I was like going through a period of great anxiety in my life, and so I think it was awful. But I didn't know. I was learning like how to do a YouTube video that was interesting, for example. And then so that was like 2019. And then
Hmm.
um during the pandemic, the thing that you're talking about is a series I did called Friends and Enemies, which didn't really have anything to do with art other than a lot of the people I interviewed were people like you who are artists because I was talking to artists at
Hmm.
our school. But the premise with that was that I was in lockdown, living at home, doing the first year of my MFA completely online. And what I missed from going to college was like having coffee with people 3 times a day and learning about the things they were working on. So my idea was just to do 10-minute interviews with people. Um, and that worked really well. Like everyone can talk about something for 10 minutes. I interviewed 60 people.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
and it was fun. For this, I want this. I ultimately want at least 100 artist interviews. That's like the goal, separate from the art classes that I want people to teach.
Hmm.
Um, so that's the model for this. Obviously, doing a 40-minute long personal interview is a lot more than like a 10-minute interview about like a silly topic. But that project taught me how to do something like this, how to be personable, how to ask people questions, how to like be social. And it's not easy, as you are figuring out right now, like asking the right kind of questions. It's like, it takes a lot of like thought and you're leading the conversation. Um, as for my personal relationship, it's really difficult. I talked
Hmm.
about this in the interview I did with James, who founded the Aesthetic Union in San Francisco that I worked at last year. And that shop was like very much tied with his own art practice, even though it was like, it was his company. So it was separate. It wasn't just his art making. It was like, he ran the business. And then he recently sold the business to my former coworker, Katya, who's amazing. But he no longer is the face of the brand, right? He does
Hmm.
workshops there, but like the company, even though it has some of the same values, is has gone through this sort of like creative change recently and will continue to change in the future. And so that was an interesting thing for me to see as someone who's starting this project because I don't envision ever not doing this. Like this is something I want to continue to do forever, but I don't want the voice of this thing to be my voice. And that's why I'm actually crowdsourcing people to write articles for the website. It's not that I'm lazy and I can't write 100 articles. It's that I want it to be communal. And I think the main issue with education in America is that it's very top down. And so you have a teacher with all the wisdom, saying this is the right way to think about things and then instilling it on younger people. And I don't want it to be that. I think education needs to be more um, like circular, not circular, global, like more every individual can contribute something. And I think that's a better way to have education. And this sounds hypocritical because I'm the one doing all the interviews and I'm in everything, but that's partially because someone needs to do the startup work to like
Right.
make this possible. And then other people can just like do their lectures and then put them on the site once the site is like established as like a real legitimate thing.
Right. And how has like approaching people for like these interviews been? Because it's like I mean like we've always had like a very open, conversation and relationship. So it's like, oh, like, would you like to do an interview? Yeah, I'm not sure, whatever. But like looking through all of the interviews so far, you have such a breadth of
Yeah.
different people and different talents in different parts of their lives. And I'm wondering, um, like, do you think that like imparting, like, do people kind of get like, oh my gosh, an interview, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been one of my favorite things seeing how different people react to it.
Hmm.
Like you are so easy to talk to. I hang out with you like all the time. I wish we hung out more, but like we see each other regularly. So
Yeah.
it's like seeing people that I talk to on a daily basis and asking them is totally fine. I have some friends with like complete stage fright for the last project I asked them, and they were like, I won't appear on camera. I'm not interested. I don't want my name associated with anything. One of my friends is actually a scientist, and she asked me to take her video down because
Mm.
she was getting too many hits on it, and it was like clouding her actual research.
Oh,
And I
whoa.
was like, "Oh fuck, I'm sorry." So I like deleted the video. Um, but like other than that, I think I personally have troubles identifying where like how to self-identify on the
Mm.
not the totem pole, but like I had a lot of insecurity about like what kind of artist I was or whether to call myself an artist like most people in the arts
Hmm.
do at some point. And so it took a long point to be able to like say like, oh, I'm an expert or like a small expert.
Hmm.
So when I approach people, I'm very nervous about approaching like people who I think are like a lot older than I am or a lot more established. And I feel more awkward asking them to like do something like this than someone who's my age, and it feels more like palling around. And that isn't because I think they're better artists or anything. It's that um, having just graduated, I really need to start building confidence as someone. And it's hard for me to consider myself an educator because I'm not teaching at a university, right?
Mm.
So it's
Right.
like um, the only real challenges I've experienced are like in terms of like trying to figure out how to not brand myself, but like what I say to people about who I am and what the project is. And I think the more I do this, the more it'll be fine. And no one said no yet. Everyone's been really excited. Some people are like, I am honored to be a part of this. And I was like,
Hmm.
that's great. I'm just like a stupid little clown on the internet. Like I
No,
think
but
it's an
I
honor.
think it's special. Like,
It is. Yeah.
like it's special. And I think even like like to your point, with community and the art community, what's so beautiful is like the conversations that we have, regardless of this video of, whether or not we're on camera, is so beautiful and so empowering to people to talk about creativity. And it's such a privilege. So don't worry about that at all. But you did mention about like it took you a while for
Yeah.
you to like um it's so funny. Like I've been thinking about this a lot recently. So like a friend of mine, we visited a gallery of someone that we both know in the fountain pen community and was like, yeah, he's a capital A artist. And I'm like, what does that mean? And like, I'm like, am I a capital A artist? And like, I don't think, to be honest, like I understand what she was trying to say
Yeah.
in the sense that like, oh, a professional artist who's like doing
Yeah.
work professionally. But I guess it's also you mentioned how hard it is. Was there kind of like a aha moment for you, or like was there something that you tried, you did in practice to kind of manifest in your brain that I am that artist? Or
Yeah. I think well, it all started when I was born. No, it started when I when I was in college. When I was in high school, I really wanted to be a physicist. I've talked about this in
Mhm.
like every video. I don't know why it's come up. And I was convinced that the only important thing in life was physics. And I was like a very strange child, and I'm still a strange child. But then when I went to college, I like quickly realized I wasn't good at math or coding, and that what I was really interested in was ideas. And so I switched from being a physicist to like philosopher of science, and that was my specialty. And so that sort of fucked up my self-identification because I was like convinced for
Mm.
like 5 years I was going to do this thing, and then I was like, oh, I'm not doing this thing. And two things happened. One, I was having dinner somewhere And I found out that the woman like at the table next to me had also gone to Stanford and lived in my freshman dorm in Robley. And she was like 90 years old. And she was like, I studied philosophy and I think that's like the best thing you can do in life. And I was like, holy shit, wow. And then I got my hair cut and the woman asked me what I did. And I said I was a philosophy student. She said, oh, you're a thinker. And so those two conversations helped me feel comfortable identifying as a philosopher and not being weird or self-conscious about it.
Mhm.
And so for like a very long time and up until now, I primarily identify as a philosopher, which is an insane thing for a 26-year-old woman to identify as because there aren't really philosophers anymore. Like it's a very small niche sort of academic community, and like people don't identify as philosophers really unless they have a PhD or they're a professor or whatever. But most of what I do is philosophical. I went to art school because I wanted to put my philosophy into practice and be able to make objects and books out of philosophical ideas. And philosophy doesn't really let you make anything other than essays. Um, that's an
Mm.
oversimplification. But basically, when I came to art school, I already felt comfortable identifying as like a thinker and a writer and a philosopher. And
Okay.
what helped me identify as an artist was like, if I'm spending all this money or my family's spending all this money to send me to art school, I have to identify as an artist because
Yeah.
I'm putting in the time and effort. And, instead of any other path I could have taken in life, this is the hill that I'm going to die on. So that helped. And then also one of my last classes, I was talking about how I was like, oh, I'm not an animator. And then the head of the experimental animation program was like, well, you've taken all the classes, so you can't say that anymore, and you should identify as an animator because you make animation. And so that sort of gave me the liberation to
Mhm.
identify as an artist. Um, and it's also my job to help other people identify as artists, so it would make no sense for me to do that if I didn't consider myself one.
Yeah, I mean, like I've had you animate. I used it on Twitch. It was a fried egg and it flipped and
It
it
was
was
so
so super cool.
fun.
A
Oh my
lot of people
god.
enjoyed it when like it happened. I'm not on Twitch anymore doing art, but like it was an era. So you're definitely an animator, artist, and philosopher in my heart, and
I
in a
did
lot
it.
of people's hearts. And it's so when you transitioned into like um you're already such a thinker already, right? Going into the MFA program into Cal Arts. How was the and I'm gonna ask this question and so maybe it'll help other people. How was going into the MFA not studying graphic design technically from undergrad and going in with like probably peers that had some sort of graphic design experience as well?
It was sort of a nightmare. Like, I'm shocked they even let me into the school. I think they let me in because I was like pretty interesting as a candidate, as someone like my
Hmm.
background is sort of interesting. For those who don't know, after I graduated from college, I like didn't know what to do with my life, and I was like, I'll be a lawyer. So I worked in a law firm for a year and was applying to law school, took the LSAT, and then while I did that, I was like, I'm kind of miserable. And so I secretly applied to art school without telling my family until I was like in the last stages. And then I
Wait,
had to
I didn't
tell them.
know this. Okay, continue.
Yeah. Yeah, no, because
Okay.
like I was applying to law school. Like I like met with different lawyers and I was figuring out who was going to write me letters of rec, and like Berkeley was my
Uh-huh.
top choice. And then I met with some Berkeley professors to like figure out like what the school was like, and then I was like, I actually don't love the law. And you know me, I'm like crazy. I'm like rule breaker extraordinaire. So it's probably a good thing I didn't
Hmm.
go into law. Anyways, but like what ended up happening is I was really sad and I was at a bar, and these two men who were sitting next to me who were like middle-aged were like, "Hey, like are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm really not." And it turns out they were both designers, like really well-respected designers, and
Hmm.
they took me under their wing. They're just like friends from college. And they eventually offered to write my letters of rec, and they like are the ones who
Oh
got
my
me into grad school.
gosh.
Um, super kind. One other person like helped he one other person wrote letters of rec for me. So it's like just very coincidental happenstance got me into art school, and also my drive because I was like I
Hmm.
literally need to figure out what to do with my life. It was hard. I'd say half or more of my classmates had graphic design undergrads or like backgrounds. I was really bad at graphic design and all my assignments were like pretty terrible initially. And I think that was good for me to fail a lot, and to learn to be okay with failing. CalArts has a program where if you have a graphic design background, you can just do a 2-year MFA instead of a 3-year MFA. It
Oh.
actually was really useful that I did the 3-year one because the first year was entirely online. So
Mm.
I actually avoided kind of fucking myself over by being really bad at graphic design. And it gave me an opportunity to stay longer and build more connections and be in that community. Um, I don't think I'm good at graphic design, and that's not an ego thing. I think I have a long way to go to be successful and to like make the kind of work that I want to make, and I know that. And I think it helps me to be kind of humble in that regard and to know that my strengths are like writing, editing, doing stuff like this, being social, building community, and that it takes a lot of practice to get good at certain art forms. I've been drawing my whole life. I'm good at drawing
Mhm.
now. I'm confident that I know how to draw
Mhm.
thing. It just takes time. Um, I'm not I'm not the world's best Photoshop artist. I'm not the best at digital art. And I think knowing how to be comfortable with your strengths and weaknesses has been kind of the main benefit of coming into CalArts. Which
Mhm.
if people don't know, people know what Stanford is. CalArts is like one of the best art schools in the country. I don't say that egotistically because there's no way to measure artistic success, but it was founded
Mhm.
by the Disney family decades ago, and it was like an amalgamation of different art schools that were like amazing at the time. And so like going there is very intimidating because everyone around you is good at art. All the animators are crazy incredible. Like you're surrounded by the most brilliant people you could ever imagine being surrounded by. So it's kind of like Stanford for artists, which is very intimidating, but ended up being a lot of fun.
You're here. You survived.
Yeah,
And
and
that's such a wild story.
yeah, it's really weird. When
Mhm.
I like if you had asked me when I was 15, like what I thought my life would be like, I would probably be like, "Oh, I'll be like a scientist forever." And now I like make art about science, which is like tangential.
Mhm.
Um, but I also am so much more confident in myself and the things that I'm interested in and what I can do and what I think my purpose in life is, which is doing stuff like this, and giving back and paying forward the incredible education I've had to give as many people access to that sort of level of discussion and theory. I mean, I can't be every professor and I can't give everyone
Mhm.
resources and I can't, teach everyone how to Photoshop or make a zine, but I can put
Mhm.
something on the internet where millions of people can see it and maybe they can learn something.
Yeah, and I think what's that? There's a quote that's like, when the student is ready, the teachers will show up or like
Yeah,
they will appear. And I
yeah,
think
exactly.
that your story really shows that. And like with free art design, that will maybe pervade one day, like a student will be like, oh my gosh, right, like, so. And I think you're already doing it. You kind of touched a little bit on like 10 seconds ago about the science and art
Yeah.
intersectionality, and I wanted to really ask you this question because you have a very distinct style, regardless whatever people say in terms of like your color choices. We could go on, we
Oh
could
God.
do a whole podcast about this, but I'm wondering, how has well, first of all, maybe if you can do a descriptor of how you see your style, and then like how has science and the intersectionality of art kind of, have they kind of um affected each other or vice versa, or was it kind of just like a little bit more compartmentalized? How did that work?
Oh man. Great question. So we'll start with the thing that you asked me about a week ago, which is color. I've always loved color. When I was at Stanford, the four subjects that I studied, I majored in philosophy and I minored in symbolic systems, neuroscience, and physics,
Mhm.
symbolic system. Neuroscience is a specialty within something called symbolic systems at Stanford, which is usually computer science, which I didn't do any of. I studied physics and art all as minors, and then I got a master's in philosophy also during my time there because I felt really insecure that I wasn't a physics major. So I just wanted to study as many things as possible to fill my time. Um, the main question that crosses all four of those disciplines, well, yeah, all four of those disciplines is like what color is. And that's because before
Mm.
we understood anything about the eye and the brain, philosophers and scientists were asking questions about color and color perception. There's a field devoted to something called qualia, which is like a quality that we subjectively experience. So something like pain or flavor, one of the senses, like anything that you sense. And
Mhm.
color is something that neuroscientists, eye scientists, brain scientists or neuroscientists, physicists, and philosophers all study. And so it's always been something that I'm really interested in. So all of my work's really colorful. I Everything I own is really colorful. My boyfriend's a redhead. Like I'm
Mhm.
very interested in making things bright and exciting. And so when I started doing my MFA, the joke that always came up was that all of my work had Katie colors, which are these what you were talking about, like very vibrant. Like one time I made a assignment and my professor was like, "Why'd you make it lime green? Like that's such a bad choice." And I was like, you know, I don't give a fuck. I'm here to break rules. I'm here to break norms. I hate old systems of design and education, which is why I started
Mhm.
this as a project outside of the university system, because there's no world in which I could work at a university and then operate underneath someone else's understanding of what good design and good education are. Because I don't like the canon. I like allowing people to like learn
Mhm.
things on their own terms, and come to truths on their own. Watch my videos with people and then take away whatever they want. There's no truth. There's no one rule. There's no one perfect way to do something. Um, so that's that. As for my style, a lot of it is just sort of an interest in old science illustrations. There's like this color chart on
Mhm.
my wall here. Um, and then I brought like that's like a color wheel that I made. So all of my work, personal work, is either like very goth and dark and skeletons, or it's like using scientific illustrations in old timey like textbook things like grids and anatomy charts and other things like that. My thesis was um, trying to use contemporary graphic design styles to sell physics to people as interesting. Um, and so that's kind of how my I don't want to pick up. There's a bunch of stuff in my room I could pick up, but that's how my style came about. And my illustration style is totally different. I think my oil pastel and painting work has nothing to do with my graphic design work.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So
like I think
it's an active, like maybe not active like boundary, but like I'm surprised you said that. Okay.
I think there's similarities. I think I use the same
Uh-huh.
color palettes in everything I do, and whether I'm buying watercolors or oil pastels or choosing a
Mhm.
digital palette, it's always the same colors, just coincidentally that I'm drawn to. Um, but like my oil pastel nudes,
Mhm.
there might be a nude in one of my graphic design things that I make, but it's every piece of art I make is for a different reason. And I think when I'm painting or
Mhm.
drawing, I mentally am doing that to relax and to like learn something about the world. And when I'm doing
Mhm.
design work, I it's kind of been forced into a more corporate arena or like a more educational arena where I'm making it with a purpose, which is usually how people separate design and art is
And
like
art.
design has a message that you're trying to say, whereas art, even if it does have a message, like it doesn't have to. Something can be like beautiful and
Mhm.
pointless, like, there's like cabbage here and then there's like Mount Tam and like the message of each of these things is that there's beauty in the world, right? Like versus
Right.
like my I don't know where it is. My graphic design thesis poster is about physics and it's not like physics is beautiful, which it is, but it's like here's how these different parts of physics interact with each other and I'm using this beautiful poster to teach you something. Um so I think that's kind of the difference. I think just there's aesthetic similarities between the different parts of my work, but I mentally separate them. That's a
That's
really good question. I haven't thought
so
about
interesting.
that
Oh
ever.
my God. Like we are groundbreaking here because that no, that's so like that because I you're so right in the sense that like if I'm illustrating, like if I was doing postcards for like fax pen to paper, that was a project that I did.
Yeah,
It was definitely more like, okay, what is gonna work within like a certain design parameter rather than like, you know, it was so different from well, I know a little bit more myself now, so my style is very different, but like
yeah,
you're so right in the sense that like art is a little bit more like subjective and there might not be a message. You're kind of just depending on what you're trying to do, maybe just like cause some emotional,
right.
like movement. But like design has like is usually solving a problem or so that's but it's so wild because like even your capstone project where you did and you can talk about this more, but like when you were doing um these shirts
Yeah.
that were stamped that was like so street design, so cool. Like you still use that color palette. So I was so surprised for you to say like, oh no, my style doesn't like it's different. And I'm like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, but I
Yeah.
get it. I understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely a lie in some sense. Like, right, like I think anyone can look
Mhm,
at anything I've made and been like, "Oh, Katie made that." Right? So in that
mhm,
way, there's not like a radical aesthetic difference between the graphic design I've done and the painting or whatever I've done. I think
right.
mentally, because I know the background of every project I've made, I can say, "Oh, there's a difference between this, and this." Um,
Mhm,
the stamping that you're talking about is like I tried to make a streetwear brand because it combined all elements of things I was interested in. So I love doing animated things like animated ads, animated movies,
mhm,
as you talked about. I love making fonts and typography. I love carving stamps and like doing
mhm.
tactile things, right? So like all of these elements are part of what makes the streetwear brand. Um, and so yeah, I was able to combine all of these artistic pursuits that I really enjoyed that just, the line gets blurry between art and design at some point.
Right.
But yeah, like that's the other thing is I would never say that art doesn't have a message because your paintings all have very strong
Right.
messages that we talked about
Mhm.
two episodes ago, 3 episodes ago. Like it's just it's a theoretical thing that we can talk about in other videos,
Mhm.
like the difference between art and design and whether that question even matters. Um, we're close to
Right.
the end. Do you have a couple last like
Yeah, I mean we're close to the end. I just wanted to wrap it up. We've been like hardcore like putting you on the hot seat. Let's Kiki and talk about our day because we both went to galleries today, right?
oh my god, yeah, I went last night, but yeah, yeah,
Okay, last
24-hour
night.
gallery. Yeah.
Okay, what's your gallery like when you walk into a gallery like are you a kind of person that like kind of looks through every detail or you like if you see something across the way that is like speaking to you you're going like directly over there like I'm so interested because like those are art spaces and you
Yeah.
see different people react differently.
I think I was a hummingbird in a previous life because I have no attention span and I love color. So like when I walked into the gallery space yesterday, it was like a friend of a friend like worked there. Um,
Mhm.
I actually not got into trouble, but like such a Katie thing happened where some guy was like interviewing people about the art and I assumed he worked at the gallery. And so I went up to him and I was like, or he found me because of my outfit and he was like, "Oh, let me interview you." And I was like, "Oh, that's funny." And so he interviewed me about some piece and then at the end, he's like, "Wow, you're really good at this. What do you do for a living?" And I was like, "Oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm an art interviewer." Like, and he was,
Oh, that's it.
but then I found out he didn't work for the gallery and he was just some random guy off the street who had just taken a video of me. And I was like, "Oh,
Oh
okay,
wait,
that's fine."
really, like a TikToker,
I don't know.
like
He's like
just
older. He had like a big video camera. It doesn't matter. The point is,
interesting.
that shit happens to me all the time because of who I am as a person.
Uh-huh.
I love color. I went to the like brightest colored thing on the wall. My boyfriend
Mhm.
went straight for the beige glass sculpture
I
that you
saw
saw.
that.
I know it's so funny. We're total
Continue,
opposites
continue.
in so many ways.
Uh-huh.
But there's I talked about this in one of the other videos. There's this book I read on the history of fabric, and Victoria Finlay is the author, and she has this thing about how when she goes to a gallery, she looks at in each room her favorite piece, a piece she wants to
Ooh.
take home, and her least favorite piece, and she spends extra time on the least favorite piece trying to convince herself to learn something about it. And so I did that all last night because I didn't like most of the stuff that I saw. Um,
Mhm.
and I was really forcing myself to like learn from the things that I don't like and not just, ignore them off the bat and then move on. You went to the Getty, which is not a gallery, is definitely
Oh, yeah. It's definitely not a gallery. It's like
elevated, you know?
yeah, it's like a full-on, like, museum, and, like, I got lost several times, and, that's interesting, like, I think because the Getty is so big, unfortunately, I did kinda ignore some of the things I wasn't really interested in.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then well, yeah, and it's everyone can, consume art however they want, right? But I was focused on the figures because that's who I am, and like, painting and drawing them and trying to understand what they were doing, looking at Rembrandt paintings and being like, "Oh my gosh, like that knife is not rendered at all. Like it's just like literally, I'm sorry, shout out to Rembrandt. Like, no, but that was what
We're
he
not
was
gonna
known
offend
for.
him. He's
That was
dead.
what he was known for. I know, but like that's what he was known for. It's like that, the swipe of like the
Yeah,
paint, like, and I'm like, that's great. Like people know it's a knife and like move on with your lives. And I think that's beautiful. While some people are gonna be like, what the hell is that? So yeah, no, that was awesome. And I just, love those spaces anyways, and it's just always so cool
yeah. You
seeing
can
people like
you can
walk
learn
around and
something from every single piece, whether you like it or dislike it. There's always a
yeah,
lesson. Um,
yeah,
I'm gonna take the mic for the end and wrap it up.
do
Um,
it.
my artist origin story, which I was telling you earlier, was that when I was like 2 or 3 or something, my parents took me to the Getty and I started touching all the paintings. And my parents got thrown out of the Getty because I was too interested in tactile art. And now I'm a tactile
Mhm,
artist who makes like fuzzy walls. I have a fuzzy wall sculpture.
mhm.
And then also I'm interested in oh fuck, what is it called? Um, sort of interactive art pieces that aren't done until someone else has interacted with them. Like that's the
Like
art.
haptics.
Haptics and relational aesthetics is the name of the art movement.
Mm,
Basically, there was like
okay.
this piece that I reference a lot that was like a pile of candy in the corner of a gallery, and it was like the exact weight of the average male in America, and it was made by an artist who he either himself or his friends were suffering from AIDS, and so the metaphor is everyone takes a piece of candy away until the pile is gone, and it's a metaphor for dying of AIDS. And so that
Oh
piece of
wow.
artwork is dependent on other people interacting with it. Um,
Mm,
very heavy end to the movie, end to the interview. But art that is interesting to me is all about community and building spaces like this. I really want fads to take off so that people can learn without having an expensive ivory tower space that they have to be a part of, and sort of anyone can feel welcome. And that's kind of it. That's what I've been doing. I am so thankful that you offered to interview me for this because I've never talked this much in these interviews because they're not my interviews. And
mhm.
now I've had an excuse to explain things. So you are literally the best. I'm going to have you give some lectures when we start doing our lectures. And thank you.
Well, thank you.